Thank you, Jim. And I guess, Janice, what you were telling me about the extra time is I've got that I talk too much. Is that it? I also like the comment about the PROC versus PROC, and since we have some New York folks here, I really like to note that in New York it's not peer review, it's quality review. So what they have in New York is a crock. So is that right, Henry? I will start out by making an apology to those of you that were at the regional meeting. So Dan, Wade, a few others. What you are going to hear, Janice says that sometimes you have to hear it a few times before you take it all in. Some of what I'm going to say, you'll see the very familiar slides here in a minute. So I apologize for that, but there will be some additional information as well that hopefully you will get out of it. Now, hopefully, I've got this so that it will work right. Nope, that didn't work. Okay, which is the button? There we go. So that's the button. They didn't give me a, there we go. Okay. My presentation is, although it is, a lot of it's going to be peer review, it's really, as Janice says, the focus, and I'll tell you at the AICPA, it's the same thing. The focus is audit quality. I mean, it is a huge initiative right now at the Institute, and I can assure you it's finding its way into our strategic plan as well. But it's been going on. We started, as we've got up here, we're calling our journey in terms of raising the level of audit quality. It really started for us back in 2012 at one of our council meetings in the fall, where we started discussing what peer review should look like in the future, practice monitoring. That's going to be towards the end of my presentation, an update on that. But it evolved. I mean, as we continue to see the issues, we're concerned that, okay, the vision we were having for practice monitoring is further term. What do we need to do in the shorter term? And that brought us into what we call our Enhancing Audit Quality Initiative, which is, I'm going to give you a little bit more information. But, since then, what's become really evident, just reinforcing this, is we've all heard about the Department of Labor's audit quality study that just came out that showed, overall a 39% deficiency rate in the quality of the employee benefit plan audits being performed. There's no disputing that. I'll get into that a little bit. And we've got the Office of Management and Budget, OMB. Some of you that practice in the A133 environment remember about 6 years ago there was a report, we call it the PCIE report, that showed about a 50% issue in those engagements. So we've got another one of those coming in a couple years. By regulations that have come out by the OMB, that's going to be mandated every 7 years that we'll have a study in that area. So this is not going away. The focus on audit quality is not going away, and our focus on making sure we're improving these areas cannot lessen. So I mentioned the Enhancing Audit Quality. I'm not going to get into the background of all this. We did just release, though, a paper. This was the result of a year-long study. We put out a paper for comment. We received a lot of feedback. As Janice mentioned, we received feedback from NASBA on this. But if you go out now, if you can read this will spell out at a high level what we're looking to do. And as the last bullet points out, this is not just peer review. I mean, that's what our focus today is going to be. This Enhancing Audit Quality really covers multiple areas. I mean, it starts with what we call, I don't know if it'll click up there. Come on. There you go. Yeah. Oh, that's where it goes. All right, let me go backwards. Okay, I've got to learn this thing. I mean, it starts pre-licensure. Our Enhancing Audit Quality issue is really a holistic look at what we should be doing from, in essence, I don't want to say cradle to grave, not quite that far, but at least a little beyond cradle and before you hit the grave. But in terms of enhancing what we should be doing, enhancing audit quality. So I mean, literally, it's pre-licensure going all the way back to what's being done in high schools. We're going to be looking at advanced placement courses, in schools to prepare people to get them into the accounting world, but looking at what the exams should be doing to be changed. I mean, it's really getting into that level, getting into what we should be focusing on in the standards arena and the ethics, and meaning standards of audit standards, quality control standards, and ethics standards. What should be done in that area. It's been a focus by all of the AICPA teams and committees that work in this area. And again, I'm not going to spend time talking about that. I will touch on quality control just a little bit. But it's also looking into what we can do in terms of member learning and competency. in terms of training to be better. And although I may be jumping around a little bit, the one thing I want to point out in here is an example of what's being done is in the employee, that now in the employee benefit plan area, we have an area of our website that you can go on and self-assess your competency in performing different types of EBP audits. And if you don't have the competency, by taking some simple questions to see what you have, it points you to areas where you can increase your competency, whether it be reading just materials, whether it's CPE courses, it's guiding you. That's a first step. We're going to be doing the same thing in the A133 arena, but we're going beyond that to we're going to be having competency, not so much a self-assessment, but, and I don't want to, it's not so much the simulations like you have in the CPA exam, but similar. It'd be more like going through problems, and based on how you solve the problem, it's going to assess your competency in areas, and again, then point you to where you can go. But next year, early next year, we're going to be laying out certificate programs that in both the EBP area and the governmental area, and we hope to go beyond that down the road. And these are not a certificate where you take CP, it's not like, some of you have probably taken our IFRS certificate or have heard about that. Well, it's not the same. That's where you take a course and you get a certificate, you've got it forever. The idea of these certificates, sometimes we're calling them badges, is it's a living certificate. You don't really get a certificate per se, or in essence are on the website with you can point to saying, I've demonstrated my competency at an expert level in, say, performing ESOP, EBP audits. Well, that's fine. You really have to go through and by the way, it's a test to do that with a competency, whether you've taken a course to get it or not. It's just taking the test to demonstrate it. You have the competency. But what will happen over time, and it'll depend on the certificate, is as requirements change, if your knowledge needs to be different in that area, you will have to retest to see that you maintain your competency, or that badge goes away. So this is going to be a means for the public to be able to go out and see, when they're looking to hire an auditor in that area, do they have the competency? So I want to point again, I don't want to spend a lot of time in this area, but it is not just what we're doing. I'm going to talk more about peer review, but this is what we call the front end. What are we doing to enhance the competency of auditors at the front end before they perform an audit? That's what this is all about. And I got to tell you, that last one I'm really excited about. That's why I wanted to spend some time, because that will probably end up having ramifications in peer review, frankly, in terms of who's qualified to look at these engagements down the road. I'll talk about how we change the requirements currently, but that clearly could be an impact later as well. And then, of course, peer review is one of our elements in the enhancing audit quality. I will be talking about that, as well as practice monitoring of the future. And then the one I will not be talking about is the other area that falls under me, our ethics enforcement area. That was covered a little bit at the regionals. Maria Caldwell talked about it. What I will say is we're working very closely with NASBA to see what can be done to aid state boards in this area. So that's really all I want to say. We're stepping up the initiatives there. So the only other thing I do want to point out at this point to demonstrate the AICPA's commitment to this area is at our May Council meeting, we approved our budget for fiscal year 16. So starting August 1 of this year through July 31 of next year. And for the first time, in my knowledge, anyone I've been able to talk to in AICPA history, we passed a budget with a deficit, a $4 million deficit. And what that deficit represents is money we're taking out in invested reserves and focusing on one area and one area alone, audit quality. That's where the $4 million is going. And that's not a one-year shot. It's just the first year is going to be funded out of reserves. We'll have to pay for it elsewhere going forward. And I will tell you the vast majority of that money is going to peer review. It's not all peer review. Some of it's my ethics team. There's more in terms of enhancing communications, the training area. But most of it is going to peer review. The peer review staff is going to be increased considerably and will need to be able to go forward in some of these initiatives we're going to be telling you about. But that's serious. I mean, we are really serious. It's almost a doubling of Sue Liebram's here, too. She's on the technical staff. It's almost a doubling of her team. So that in itself is going to be challenging. But we are absolutely serious about this area. Okay, here we go. Okay, so what are we doing? What's going on in this area? What's the peer review board doing? What is it doing in terms of this area of strengthening quality? Let's talk about what we're doing first in the making sure we have firm quality. Janice alluded to this as the licensure area. In the past, they're verifying licensure has been a part of peer review, but it's really been at the individual level. And Janice talks about being passionate. Anita will tell you, our chair, this is probably the area she was the most passionate about this past year, and and she would probably admit that, like Janice says, she didn't get, everything she wanted, but got most of what she wanted. I mean, the key here is it's really, frankly, it's just wrong. I mean, we were finding out, and you all have seen it, that there were firms out there that were performing work in your states or going, cross borders when they should be licensed and they're not. That's just wrong. I mean, that's just inexcusable. So what has changed is that there will, as a part of peer review, the reviewer will have to verify the firm's license in its home state. Okay, it could be by the firm providing information. It could be if the reviewer is able to go out to CPA Verify. I think it's the right place, to find out the licensure. They can do it, or the states, but they have to verify the firm licensure in the home state. They also have to do the same thing on a test basis with the partners in the firm. And bear in mind, it's a test basis. It's the same way that in peer review, we also test CPE. We don't look at 100%. It's a test, okay? But the focus is, in doing this, is really to find out in a system review, and you all know what they are, this group knows what a system review is what is the firm's process for ensuring that they're properly licensed. Now, first I mentioned home state, but then it's the system is when you're going into other states. What is your process to make sure you're appropriately licensed? So part of the testing is also to find out whether the firm was properly licensed in other states. And this is what Janice was alluding to in terms of where some of the difficulties and some of the discussions came in, is it really is seeing what their system is and their process. In peer review, it's going to be quite possible that they find out that a firm was not licensed when they went into another state, but if they find out their process was, when we knew we were going to be doing an engagement in that state, we contacted the state and we did this, that, and the other, here's our documentation, what we found, and they couldn't get an answer or couldn't get it done in time, that will not necessarily negatively impact the firm if they took steps to make sure that they were properly licensed. That's what Janice was alluding to. On the regulatory side, we need to make it as easy as possible for firms. I encourage that, I agree, but our point is firms need to be doing this. They need to be taking the steps they possibly can to be appropriately licensed. So that is new. In engagement reviews, not the system reviews, there we will be looking not only at the firm's license in their home state, but we're also going to be looking at the proper licensure of for the engagements are looked at for the responsible individual for the engagement. That could be a partner, it could be in a compilation, it could be a manager or someone else who's responsible. That doesn't have to be a partner that signs in that case. But that we'll be looking at the responsible personnel in that case. So that's new. What? Maybe I have to point somewhere else. There we go. Okay. Last, you all, I suspect, is there anybody here that is not familiar with what we talk when we talk about what we call our DOL project at peer review, about the listing of engagements we received from the Department of Labor? This is burned in my memory forever. A list of 4,918 firms that was provided to us by the Department of Labor, us meaning the AICPA, where they simply wanted to know whether the firms were enrolled in peer review. It's all they really wanted to know. It was a separate initiative. It's not related to their audit quality study, but that was their question. And we dug into that. Now, we went further. We wanted to see not only were the firms properly enrolled in peer review, we wanted to see that they were having the proper type of peer review, a system review versus an engagement review, and whether or not they had included an employee benefit plan audit in their most recent peer review if they were required to do so. And I think, we've said this before, the results were very disappointing, and that we found out that 21% of those firms were not properly, had not properly complied. It was in one of those categories they had not properly complied. That led to scrambling for a lot of things were done by the board. It was a lot of things were then done by state boards of accounting. And by the way, Janice, I'm going to do the same thing you did in the regionals. When I say the board, I'm referring to the peer review board. I'm not referring to a board of accountancy. So when I say board, but this This has resulted in a lot of activity at our level, at the state board level, at the NASBA level, for assisting boards in finding out, where about firms that weren't properly enrolled, which then had the licensing implication. It's been a mess. What I want to talk about now is forget everything that happened and what we did on recalls of peer review reports and acceptance letters. What I want to tell you is what's going on now. This is what was put in place and what you will see going forward. Is right now, it started last year, when a peer reviewer, team captain, is performing the review, they're required to really reinforce to the firm, that the importance of having a complete listing and what will happen if they don't provide a complete listing. And I'm going to get into that in a minute, but that's the team captain is required to really reinforce the importance of this. They're also, part of that is to tell them that at the end of the review, they're going to be signing a representation letter where they're acknowledging not only that they provided a complete list, but that they acknowledge, they understand this representation letter is going to be saved until the next peer review for 3 years. And if it is found that they did not provide a complete list, this representation letter will serve as prima facie evidence that the firm, put it bluntly, lied. Okay? It's very serious. That's why it's very serious. And then what will happen, because I will say we're going to have it happen no matter what, I just hope it's very few, that if we then find out later that there is a misrepresentation, that they did not complete give us the peer reviewer a complete list of the engagements, the report will be, actually, we didn't change this, did we? I would say this is the same problem we had at the NASBA summits. It says report recalled. Change that to acceptance letter, please, not report recalled. It's up to the peer reviewer to recall the report. That will probably happen, but will absolutely happen is the administering entity will recall the acceptance letter, and the state board will be notified. And now, this is what Janice was alluding to. The notification is a direct communication to the board, but it doesn't say that the acceptance letter was recalled. We're not, unfortunately, in our confidentiality, we can't make that blunt a statement. What it will say is the peer review acceptance letter said this, now it says this. It's about as clear as we can say that it's different, okay? Go look at the acceptance letter and you'll clearly see it's the one that they had 3 years ago. It's not the current one. But, it's our way of telling you this is what's occurred. So that's what's going to occur. That's really what we currently did, but this is going to go forward. But what's really important beyond that is now there is going to be, the firm is then going to go before a hearing panel. And by the way, the peer review board is going to begin having hearing panels on a monthly basis scheduled. Not just for this, but for other things. We know that there's going to be so much coming up. We're going to, instead of scheduling a panel once we have complaints, it's a monthly basis. We know we're going to have them. So it will go to the next hearing panel that can occur reasonably with proper notice, and the hearing panel will determine whether or not the firm will be allowed to have a replacement review. And I'm putting it that way because frankly, the presumption at this point is if we've got a representation letter that said that you gave a complete list of engagements and you didn't, that's prima facie evidence that you lied. When they go to that hearing panel, the presumption is going to be is that frankly, they're not going to be allowed to have a replacement review. That firm is going to be terminated from peer review. And when that happens, the state boards will also be notified, and you'll be notified they were terminated and why. Okay, that will be a positive notification. And that obviously could have great implications depending on what your board does, if peer review is required. But the firm will be terminated. If we determine that is something very unusual, some reason that legitimate, that they honestly thought that they had provided the list and they hadn't, then they would be allowed to have a replacement review, and it has to be done within 60 days. So this is different than what we've had before. This is a current process. There's also this re-enrollment. It would take a second hearing panel to allow the firm to re-enroll in peer review and to have one. And frankly, to do that, they're going to have to demonstrate what they put in place to make sure this doesn't occur again, up to and including potentially firing whoever the quality control partner was that didn't provide a complete list in the past. I'm not saying that we'll have to do that, but that's a potential. This is very, very serious. Similar requirements on the what we call the no ANA. those that don't know what this is, a firm can be enrolled in peer review, but not actually undergo peer review. It's a choice in Virginia. To have a firm permit, you have to be enrolled in peer review, whether you do A&A work or not. Those firms, on an annual basis, in essence, we send them a scheduling form, and they either have to schedule their peer review or they have to send us an acknowledgement back, a letter that says, asserting that they are not performing A&A work and therefore don't have to schedule a peer review. And that's an annual thing. So there's there's a very similar process that goes into place if a firm has signed one of those letters as opposed to this rep letter where we find out that they misrepresented. So this is big. The last is use of publicly available databases. We are now beginning in peer review to collect employer identification numbers. It's a part of the scheduling process of peer review. We are in the process of changing our database at the AICPA, and well, actually, even before we're not even waiting for that. My speech is dated here. We are actually going to be going through a proactive process of reaching out to firms in the very near future to get the EIN numbers that we do not have. We have a number of them, and they're going to be required to provide them to us. We're going to be putting them into the system, and if a firm doesn't provide it, they will be dropped from our program. I mean, it is a requirement that they're going to have to provide an EIN number. What we will be able to do with that is the Federal Audit Clearinghouse last year, I think it was last year, maybe the year before, at our request, started requiring firms to provide the EIN. The Department of Labor's EFAS-2 system, firms have their employer identification number there. We've recently, working with HUD, we had to do a FOIA request, but with HUD, we've been able to get the information of firms that file on the REACT system. We will be using this information to continue to match these databases to try and find firms that are not properly having the right type of peer review. Our hope down the road is we'll be able to make this an automated process where we can get automatic feeds. And to that end, we're actually working with, NASBA has a parallel initiative. We've been working with their committee. Has Maria gotten here? I know Rebecca's here. Rebecca, if I say this wrong, please correct me. But they are, that committee is actually on the same way we're trying to encourage. They are trying to encourage boards to be willing to also start collecting employer identification numbers so that at least initially we will be able to match the two systems and be able to have boards provided direct reports of firms that are not enrolled in peer review, but we would like to expand that program even further. If haven't gone too far, Rebecca, I want to say that what they were actually working at this point with one state to be a pilot in this program, hopefully, so we can start working towards this end. But the idea is, our dream is that someday we will be able to match all of these databases at one time and be able to kick it out. The boards could look at it, we could look at it, we would be able to find out where firms aren't complying. This is a big dream from both sides, because I know the boards are just as concerned as we are about this process. Rebecca, are you here? Did I overstep my bounds in what I just said? No, she stepped out. Well, if I overstep, she can fuss at me later. So, if Ken's still in here, he can tell me if I overstep my bounds. Okay. The key point there is what the caveat for board members in here is that this is something that's being tested and rolled out, and it obviously is not something that will be done from the ALD side without your all's consent and buy-in, because clearly it's your all's information. But it is the dream that we would like to go forward. Okay, another thing that happened I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this one, but SARS 21, the preparation service. You may or may not be aware, but the peer review board had an exposure draft, and the peer review board wanted to exclude preparation services from peer review. They believe they should not be a part of peer review. Received tremendous amount of feedback from certain states that believe they should be. So what the end result is that for those of you that go back and remember SARS-8, it's very similar to the old SARS-8, which doesn't exist or won't exist anymore. Requirement is that for AICPA purposes, AICPA, okay, our purposes of an AICPA member is that if the highest level of service you perform is a preparation service. In other words, you don't issue reports in the compilations, you don't do reviews, you don't do audits. If the highest level of service you do is a preparation service, for AICPA purposes, you do not have to enroll in peer review. However, once you're enrolled in peer review, the preparation service is a part of the peer review. Okay, that's what we did with SARS 8. That's what the peer review board has done with preparation service. So the practical impact of this is if you're in a state that requires preparation services to be a part of the scope of peer review, those firms can enroll in peer review to meet their state licensure requirements. Because that will include that in the scope of peer review. That's where the peer review board, we listened. We listened to what came, or they listened. I'm not a part of the board, I'm staff. Listened to the request of the state boards, so that could be done. Any questions? Well, actually, I'm not going to call for questions right now. Janice knows me. I'm going to go all through this. I'll be here later. I'll be here all day, and I'll also be here for Stump the Chumps if there's questions. And I will field some at the end if we have time. Why won't this thing? There we go. Okay. This is another big one in terms of strengthening firm quality. You know, we have heard for years that it takes too long to get bad firms out. What is very interesting, before I get into the details, what is really interesting, Janice talked about the Compliance Assurance Committee's white paper that just came out recently on what they recommend boards do in terms of considering actions to take against firms that have consecutive non-pass reports. I will tell you that why I'm saying this is interesting is the peer review board's deliberations were without any knowledge, without looking at that paper, and the two are almost the same. I mean, it's very similar. So I'm reassured by that. It's like, you know, we're all coming to the same conclusion. But in essence, what is going to happen? And you've got to kind of follow the words in terms of what happens from the peer review side. Is now that if a firm gets 2 consecutive non-pass reports, okay, whatever that combination is, okay, but so it could be if it's a pass with deficiency to another pass with deficiency, 2 in a row, the report acceptance body, the RAB, I'll use that acronym a lot too, is required to deliberate whether that firm should be referred to a hearing panel to be terminated from the program. It's not mandatory that they're going to go to a hearing panel, but they're required to assess it. It's got to be in their minutes. They have to talk about it in Oversight, which I'll talk about. We'll be making sure that the RABs are doing this. It has to be a deliberative process. And I say that because and even in the paper that the CAC has come out with, you'll see it there. There are legitimate reasons why you may have 2 consecutive non-pass and you wouldn't terminate the firm from the program. It could be two totally different issues. It could be a change in firm structure. There's a lot of good reasons that you wouldn't want to terminate a firm for this reason. But it's required that the RAB talk about it. Now, if it's 2 consecutive fail or a pass with deficiency to a fail, that they got worse, it's presumptively mandatory that there is a referral to the hearing panel. Now, that's a higher level. That means that you're still going to have the deliberation, but the deliberation is going to be, there has to be an extraordinary reason why we don't send them to a hearing panel. And I can't even give you an example, other than maybe it would be the one that, we had a merger of the firms, and the new quality control partner wasn't familiar with what was going on. I mean, something that was really beyond the firm's, I won't say not beyond their control, but something that's somewhat reasonable. But generally, it's presumptively mandatory. It is presumptively mandatory, and the expectation is generally the firm is going to be referred to a hearing panel, which will then determine whether the firm is allowed to continue in peer review. So that's the second. And at this point, we're very similar to the CAC's paper. The third point is the one that's not addressed in CAC, because they basically don't think you should get to this point, and I tend to agree. But if you have 3 consecutive non-pass reports, if you get out 1 more year, it is now mandatory. There is no question it goes to a hearing panel. There is no excuse. So this is a huge change. And practically speaking, in the current process, it has taken 3 times before it's gone to a hearing panel, and it hasn't been a slam dunk that it happens then. That's why legitimately there has been criticism that it takes too long to get firms out. So this is big. I mean, the first time a firm is in a peer review program and they fail, they basically have 1 more shot, or they may be out. They've got 3 years, so we're getting rid of them in 3 years. So, I know you want to ask a question. I'll take one. Go ahead.
I noticed the effective date, but is this considered any peer reviews released prior to that date, or is all peer reviews released?
No, it's the second one. Effective January 1, if it's your second non-pass, it goes into effect. Yeah. Yeah, bear in mind, we do have the effective dates up here, and particularly those that are serving on boards understand. You have to give time for something to put in place. You pass it, it's not something you can do retroactive. We have to make sure people have the time to learn and get ready for it. But yes, that's effective. That was effective January 1. Okay. All right, come on. This drives me crazy. I don't know if the battery's dead on this or what, but there you go. Okay. Enhancing reviewer quality. We always say it is completely true. You're not going to have a good peer review if you don't have a good peer reviewer. We did something this year, as we call it, a pilot. It was an experiment that we wanted to, let me back up. The AICPA generally, in rare cases, has never done direct oversight of a peer review from the AICPA level. The state societies' oversight's always been a part of the peer review committees doing oversight of reviewers, but we've generally not done it from a national level. There have been some specific cases, but we just don't do it, haven't done it. We decided to change that this year. We had a pilot program where we went out and hired subject matter experts. They're still practitioners, but they're subject matter experts in what we call our must-select industries. EBP auditing, governmental auditing, A133, SOC reporting, fiducia, the banking, certain banking, and carrying broker-dealers. In those areas, we went out and secured the services of experts. Now, these generally came from either the expert panels at the AICPA that are the ones that write the guides, or in the case of the quality centers, they could have been members of the executive committee of the quality centers. We had some others, but those are generally where these came from. They were recognized subject matter experts in these industries. And what we did is we looked at 90 reviews. It was broken down into two categories. We had 75 that were done purely randomly, and we did that because we want to establish a baseline of quality that we can measure our results going forward. But we had a 75 that were purely random, and then we had another 15 that were targeted. And what we did in that area is we wanted to go after where the biggest risk is we have some reviewers that perform a lot of reviews. We call them our high-volume reviewers. We want to make sure, clearly that's the greater risk if they're not competent. So for those high-volume reviewers that were not selected in the random sample, we went back and took another 15 to look at the high-volume reviewers. So what happened is the reviewers had no idea that they were going to be oversighted. They would go out and perform the peer review the way that they normally do. When the state side, the administering entity, would receive the work papers from the reviewer, at that point, the firm and the reviewer would be notified that this review had been selected for oversight, and the firm was to send the work papers, a complete set of work papers for the engagement that was selected, be it EBP, whatever type it was. And by the way, it was mainly EBP, A133. We looked at one SOC in the random, but we did not look at any fiducia or carrying broker-dealers. But so it's mainly EBP and A133, governmental. But the work papers were then sent either directly to the subject matter expert or to the AICPA, and we forwarded it to the subject matter expert. But the point is this consultant, this SME, would then look at the work papers the same way the reviewer did, using the same checklist, independent of the reviewer and not having any knowledge of what the reviewer did. Okay, I'll talk about the process after that, but what I want to tell you is what happened then. Of the randomly selected, because that's the one I think is and I want to make sure I look at my notes to make sure I don't misquote the statistics. By way of a little background, we publish an annual oversight report. The peer review board does, the oversight task force does, and in that, one of the things it talks about is the number of high risk or must select engagements where we've had non-conforming engagements. Historically, that has been somewhere 8 to 10% is what peer review has found of these areas are non-conforming. Just to give you that as background. That's historically what we have found. Okay? Now contrast that with the DOL, they're saying 39%, 49% that we had from the last PCI report, but radically different numbers, okay? And that's been some of the criticism, or concern, I should say, okay, is why they were different. Well, of the random process, the peer reviewers found that this is a 75, 10% of those engagements they found to be non-conforming, right in line with what we've had in the past. Kind of what we'd expect, right? The subject matter experts found 42% of those engagements to be non-conforming, right in line with what we've heard from the regulators. That, in one way, was disappointing. In another way, it was reassuring, because it means, yes, we do have a problem. We know where we have to go. And some of the things we're already putting in place we felt were informative. But I got to tell you what really is concerning about this is that, we have heard for years from firms that the Department of Labor is too tough. HHS is too tough when they come in. My peer reviewers looked at this engagement for every year and never found a problem. They are too picky. We have firms out there that legitimately think they're doing the work right, and they aren't. That's scary. So anyway, the point of this is uncovered a problem. Next slide we'll talk about going forward. I will tell you at this point, we are still in the process of following this through, because these non-conforming engagements have an impact on that firm, because that impacts that current peer review. It is impacting the evaluation of that reviewer as a reviewer and what's going to happen, and I'll talk about some of that in a minute. That is still going through the process, so I can't tell you what the end results have been of like how many of those reviews were passed and now they've gone to pass with deficiency or fail. We don't have all that. We're still going through the process on that. At some point that will be reported, probably in the oversight, in our annual oversight report. But I will tell you, I just want to assure you, it is having an impact, and we are following it through the process to make sure it's handled appropriately. I also want to point out that I don't want to minimize this, but Janice and I have had this discussion a lot. It doesn't mean necessarily, and I don't want to say it's a small firm, big firm issue. I don't want to say that, but I do want to say that it's a reality that the peer review of small firms tend to be performed, generally by one person, a team captain. And so a lot of these, what we have found, and I don't know this is 100%, but a lot of the case is we have a team captain that's going out to perform a peer review, and they could be a very good team captain. And what I mean by that is once they've uncovered a problem, they're good at seeing what's the root cause, what's wrong with the firm's system of quality control, what does the firm need to correct the system. The problem is they weren't sufficiently competent in the area of a high-risk area, and they shouldn't have looked in that engagement. And if that's the case, it is a simple solution. That reviewer just doesn't look at those anymore. You bring in a team member. And again, I'm not going to go too far down this path, but because I don't have in here the peer reviewer pool, but I will tell you we have initiatives going on right now to really recruit subject matter experts from firms to be team members, because that's where I think the real big part of the problem is. So I don't want to get too concerned that we may have, some are just bad reviewers that should not be reviewing at all. But a lot of this is that we have reviewers that are stretching their capacity, sometimes for good reasons, and then not doing what they should do. Janice, I won't share my story about yours. So maybe I will when I get to the qualifications. But so I want to say that some of this is, although it's bad, some of this is a relatively easy solution. And we'll be reinforcing to make sure these team captains bring in the subject matter experts. But this is a problem. Real quickly, going forward, I mentioned that was a pilot. This will be permanent. With this national oversight, it was so effective, it is going to be a permanent part of our process. This year, we will be looking at least 150 engagements, at least. I say at least. If we are able to do more, we will. It is going to be a little different this year. As a certain number of these, we're still going to have that base of about 75 that are random, because I want to continue to look at that, that to see if over time if we're making improvements in quality. But the rest are going to be more targeted. They're going to be directed to areas of where the peer review is focusing. A lot of it's going to be towards A133 because we know the quality studies coming out. A lot of it are going to be geared towards firms that do just a few of these, because as the DOL report pointed out, firms that do a few number of engagements tend not to do them as well as those that specialize. So, so we're looking at targeting, but it's going to be a little different this year in the way we approach it. And we're also, for a certain number of them, going to be actually going on site to do the reviews, as opposed to do them off-site, because part of the initiative will be for those firms that get it right, okay, what did they do different? What did they do to make sure they're getting it right? So we can also get best practices to share for firms on how to do it well. Okay, not just dinging those that are doing it poorly, but helping firms improve. Okay. Okay, now we get into reviewer performance. A couple things in this area, and this one really speaks to qualifications of a peer reviewer. And in this slide, we're talking both sort of combining team captains as well as subject matter, but more to the subject matter expert. The practicing in the last 5 years of public accounting is nothing new. That's a requirement now. That's remaining the same. Having experience at the level they review is not different either. In other words, if you only do, if you're performing engagement reviews only, performing review engagements, I've got it backwards, as a partner in a firm. If that's all you do reviews, you don't do audits, you can't be a team captain on a firm that has audits. You have to be working at that level. You could do engagement reviews, you couldn't do system reviews. It's the last areas where the real changes are going to be. And the first one is the must-select engagements. And this is, again, whether you're a team captain or a team member, this is where the changes are. I will use this term only once. You have to have A-level experience, all right? Those of you here from the state societies know what that means. But what it means is you have to be performing this work, currently performing this work, and to simplify it, that means you're actually auditing an A133, that you're a partner doing A133 work in your own firm. So it's current experience. It's not that you've done it in the past 5 years. So you can bear in mind, the general requirement to be the team captain is the 5 years of experience, the most recent 5 years. But for the must select, the high risk, you have to be currently doing it, not in the last 5 years, and it has to be in your own firm. The reason that's different is in the past we have allowed reviewers to be doing consulting work. They may have been hired by other firms to do an EQCR in this area, or they may have been brought in to consult on these engagements for other firms that are performing it. That no longer qualifies. It has to be in your own firm. That's a big change. And the other is that the reviewer of the must-select engagement, if it's applicable, meaning if it's an EBP engagement or a governmental engagement, that firm, the reviewer's firm, must be a member of the applicable AICPA Audit Quality Center. Those are the two big changes there on the additional qualifications for must-select. Now, in terms of maintaining levels of performance, that comes next. We've always had training requirements for peer reviewers. Right now, it's for a team captain, you have to have 8 hours every 3 years in peer review specific. That's going away. We have changed the. Don't want to get ahead of myself here. I guess it's not on the slide. We've changed the requirements of the initial training for a team captain from what it is today, but only slightly. And so I'm just going to get off the slide here a minute and just talk about it. For a team captain right now, it's a 2-day training course, basically, is the way it's taken. What's going to happen going forward is the first day is going to be replaced by a series of modules, self-study modules, that at the end of each module there will be a test that has to be completed with a 90% pass rate, not the normal 70% for CPE, but to demonstrate the competency before you can go to the next module. And after the completion of those modules, then you will go to a 1-day in-person course where it's pretty much going through a case study. And that's really what we have in today's environment. It's just the first day we're replacing. So that's the team captain training. Then on an ongoing basis, and that's what this slide is, there is now going to be, instead of that 8 hours every 3 years, there is going to be an annual requirement. An annual requirement. One way that the annual requirement can be met, and we can't even tell you what the hours are. It's going to be, again, an on-demand type course. We don't know whether that's 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours. Frankly, it could vary from year to year because the intent of this ongoing team captain training is whatever is relevant that year for the team captain to know. What has changed in the peer review? What is being emphasized in peer review? We need to make sure they're aware of it when they're going into the peer review season. So they will have to take this self-study and pass it with a competency test of 90% or better. That's an annual requirement. We're also now going to have an annual requirement for team members in the must-select areas. Okay? This is new. This is new. These individuals that will also have a similar on-demand self-study course in their respective and by the way, we're talking about doing this initially in EBP and in governmental. At some point we may have one in fiducian, SOC, but initially we're rolling it out in the areas where we have the biggest risk to the public. But they would have to take the course, and pass the 90%. But bear in mind, these courses are not just testing your competency in what's changed in, say, the EBP area. It's how it's to be applied in peer review. It's really being focused not just on the technical competency, but on how it's applied in peer review. So again, that will be required with a test. Now, I will point out that that is one way to do it. The other option will be that either both for the team captain as well as the subject matter expert as they attend our annual peer review conference. At our peer review conference, we have optional sessions the day before the conference begins. It's a 4-hour session. One's on EBP, another 4-hour on governmental. And so that would be in lieu of the subject matter expert area, and the conference itself could be in lieu of this annual requirement. Now, I will tell you that those who have ever attended a peer review conference, some would say, oh yeah, well, they're getting off easy. They don't have to take this competency test. These conferences are not like what we're doing here. Not that you all aren't paying attention, but this is a typical session where someone could be sitting in the back, and I know that's not what you're doing, Mark, like that. You're not sleeping or reading the Wall Street Journal, but you could have people not paying attention. Peer review conference is extremely interactive. It is not, there is some of this that goes on the conference, but there are breakout sessions, there are table discussions, they're facilitated. We don't let people sleep. We make them contribute. So they're very interactive, and they will substitute very well for the competency test. So anyway, those will be the requirements. This goes into effect May 1 of next year. And what that means to be able to perform a peer review next year, starting May 1, you have to have met this requirement. So they will either have to be going to the peer review conference this year, here in a few weeks in August, and we're going to be rolling out these modules, which will be coming out later this year. They will have to, and take it before May 1. They will have to take those competency tests before May 1. So this is coming. Okay. Here we go. Now, let's talk about those reviewers that aren't performing appropriately. Now, I'm not going to get, for the interest of time, and because I know Alan Long is going to be covering this later on, I'm not going to go into a lot of where are you, Alan? Okay, you're in the back there somewhere? Alan, where are you? Okay. Oh, were you going to go over what I just went over too? Okay. Well, you're also going over this, right? The expediting the removal, what we talked about yesterday? Yeah. So I'm going to defer to Alan to go into the details, and then if he says it wrong, I'll stand up and correct him. But other than that, but you will hear it later. But what is happening is there is going to be a much more deliberative, formalized approach to evaluate peer reviewers and their performance when at the report acceptance level, when they're considering the report, documenting, giving feedback, and if the reviewers are not performing, getting them out of the program. Either remediating them or getting them out of being peer reviewers. At a high level, that's what this means. Alan will share more of that later this morning. I'm sorry, Alan, I didn't realize you were going over the education too. Did I skip? Okay, good. I can't tell whether I went 2 slides or not. Janice mentioned quality control, that one of the things that the CAC talked about was a need for more training on quality control, and she alluded that the AICPA is already working on this. This is what we're doing. There has been an initiative, we talked about this as holistic by various teams. There was a task force that was formed it comes under the Auditing Standards Board. It's their task force, but it's had members of the peer review board as well as members of the 2 quality centers executive committees that have been working on what could be done to enhance the system of quality control, whether the standards themselves should be changed, and if not the standards being changed, which we're really not going to change the standards, what could be done in terms of additional guidance and training so that firms understand a system of quality control. What has evolved is there is a webcast that is going to be given on July 30th. It's a 2-hour webcast. It is free CPE. We're publicizing it, and I encourage you all to continue to publicize it. It is free CPE. What is going to occur on that webcast is a member of the Auditing Standards Board is going to talk about what is the requirement in each element as we go through each element of SARS-8 and what the requirement is. A past chair of the peer review board who was on the last task force for SARS-8, Rick Reeder, some of you all have met Rick, will be talking about what peer reviewers would be looking at, and I'm going to get into that in a minute. Examples of what peer reviewers would be looking at in terms of questions they would be asking to verify that a firm is properly applying or has the right element of quality control in their firm. And then we're going to have a member of PCPS, the Private Company Practice Section Executive Committee, who is also a member of the peer review board now. Going off topic here, PCPS is a side, it's not part of this task force, but in helping this, they have taken a lot of what's going on in terms of what the guidance needs to be given and have developed a number of practical tools for firms to apply. So this third person is going to be talking about a tool and how that can be used for a firm on a practical basis to apply this. So this webcast is going to be 2 hours of going through this process, and at the end of the webcast, all of these tools that PCPS has developed will be made available to the firms for free, and it doesn't matter whether you're a member of PCPS or even a member of the AICPA. This is being given to all firms, okay? So that's the webcast. I'm going to jump down to the last bullet. What's also happening is that 2-hour webcast, the same material, is being expanded to develop 4-hour in-person workshops that are going to be given in conjunction with the state societies, and I can't tell you which ones are doing it. We've reached out to all the state societies, a great number of them, for, again, what'd you say, Larry? Yeah, a lot of states are. I know a couple are not, but I mean a lot are. But these are 4-hour workshops, again, free, CPE, open to any firm, okay? And it's the same material that's being used in the webcast, but it's being expanded to have a lot of practical scenarios where the participants will go through scenarios and what do you think should be done? How should this be applied? So that it can reinforce the training. Now going forward, these webcasts, the first one, the 2-hour webcast, is going to be available to be viewed, no CPE, just to be viewed so a firm can view it. We believe that we're going to be turning that into an on-demand course. I can't commit that. That's in the works to see if we can. That wouldn't be free if we do that. So it'd be something talking longer term beyond this year. And same with the 4-hour workshops that are going to be free this year. Those are going to be turned into group studies that could be used going forward. Again, it wouldn't be free at that point, but it would be courses that could be used. But this is a huge initiative that we're doing at the AICPA level as a part of the Enhancing Audit Quality because we want the firms to get it right. We're really trying to push it out, get firms to understand what a system of quality control is and how to apply it practically in their practice. This is the initiative here. Now, going forward, what is, and I know it's not really on a slide, like an under consideration by the peer review board, well, what is also being discussed and will be discussed further by the peer review board is how the focus of team captains can be changed in how the system of quality control is being evaluated. And the way that the staff, and I'm going to say it's just staff at this point, is working on it, is basically taking a lot of the team captain checklist in this area and combining them into one. It's actually reducing the size of the checklist, but it won't reduce the amount of the work because the concept would be instead of going through the checklist and does the firm have an EQCR policy, for example, is the policy appropriate and why is it appropriate, and document why it's appropriate for that firm. So it's really getting into, or is, not just does the firm communicate its policies and procedures to staff, how did you verify, document how you verified that the staff was familiar. How many staff did you talk to and were they familiar with the policies? In other words, it's going to get the team captains to be deeper in evaluating whether the firm system has actually an appropriate system of quality control and is applying it appropriately. It's changing, it's enhancing the focus of the team captains. That's the idea. I'm telling you that's under consideration. That hasn't been passed. It's one of the things that's under consideration right now to be done. But a lot of these materials in this course, in terms of these, when Rick Reeder's talking about what peer reviewers could be asking, that's the sort of stuff that would be put into these materials for team captains. Again, that's under consideration. But we absolutely believe that this is critical. Firms have to have a good system of quality control. Okay, and like I said, I could have just put it, I'm sorry, I did have it on my next slide. That's the first bullet on this slide, is the board is looking at ways to change its approach. Another thing that's under, again, that's why I put this under consideration, I should have just gone to the slide before, is this is the caveat. This has not been discussed by the peer review board necessarily in a closed session or an open session. It's really at the standards task force level, so a lot of things can change as you get through the process. But these are things that are under consideration. One of them is looking at when a firm has a non-conforming engagement, should there be some sort of a corrective action, even though there's no impact on the report grade? I mean, as you know now, in this room, if a firm gets a pass with deficiency or a fail, there is going to be some sort of corrective action, and usually that means there's a non-conforming engagement. But it is possible to blow an A133 engagement, and it could be maybe just a partner that really didn't do well. There may be multiple partners that really didn't impact the firm itself. Okay, didn't affect the grade, so there is not a required corrective action. One of the consideration is, even though this is not what we would think of in terms of peer review, it's not a system approach, should we be looking at this engagement level, because this does impact that overall level of audit quality, should we be requiring corrective action at that level? It's under consideration. Look, you'll see the discussions about it. And the last, I think you will see, but it's under consideration, is what about the firms that are given corrective action, whether it's for the second bullet if we change it or under the existing standards, what can we do to streamline the removal of the firms that don't correct as they should? Okay? I can tell you that's under consideration, will be addressed. It just hasn't been addressed yet. I don't think there's a lot of debate in that area. It's just how do we do it? We get the firms out that are refusing to. And again, we talked about the firms that get consecutive fails. This is talking about a firm that has a pass with deficiency or fail and then doesn't appropriately remediate, doesn't approve the corrective action, or completes a corrective action or says they have, but you go in and do a pre-issuance review and it's just as bad as the one you looked at the first time. They didn't do it appropriately. What do you do with those firms? So this is making it tougher at the corrective action level. Okay. All right. Now let's talk about, I'll just go through this real, I don't need to, since this doesn't click the way I would like to, let me just go to there. Okay. Changing topics. Now let's talk about practice monitoring the future, that other element that I was clicking through in the slide earlier. How many of you read the paper? Okay. You all are pretty familiar. I'm not going to go through it in a lot of detail. What I want, but I want to present it a little bit differently than probably you read it in the paper. Okay. This initiative, as I'd mentioned, started in 2012 at Council. Now we have actually two task forces working on this. The steering task force at the high level is going to be meeting here at the end of this month. And we have an architect's task force that's working on a tool, which I'll talk about. But the concept that has evolved in practice monitoring the future is, again, that it was like, okay, if we were to reinvent peer review, practice monitoring now, ideally now, versus how it was 30 years ago, because technology was, back then we didn't even have fax machines. much less the internet and everything. I mean, it was just a totally different world back then. So peer review has evolved, but I mean, it basically is the same thing we've done for 30-some years. Okay? It's the same. So if we were to look at it now, what would be effective? How would it be different? And the concept is, to be different, it needs to be more near real time, not something that's every 3 years retrospective. It has to be something that's benefiting the firm and their practice in real term. So this paper came out, and it was, the term there says, it was purposely provocative. We put things out there that we knew people would look at and say, are you kidding me? You can't do that. Well, we wanted people to think beyond that. I mean, think beyond this. Say, if you could, what would it look like? What would it look like if it could be done? Don't think about the technology can't do that. If you had technology, could do this, what would it look like? That was really what we were asking in this paper. We have gotten a number of comments that we're still putting together. That's what our steering task force is going to be addressing here in a couple of weeks and going forward. But we've all along said, this concept is not, what's in the paper is not what's going to happen. It's a concept based on the input. We're going to evolve this thing. We're going to turn this into something that longer term, 10, 15, 10 years from now, whatever, could be a replacement for peer review that's going to meet various objectives. And the guiding principle, all right, come on. This has got to be a battery issue. I don't know. Okay. The guiding principle is what we're trying to achieve is to increase public protection through an enhanced audit effectiveness by highlighting potential risk indicators. Now, that's a key word, and I'm going to give an example of this in a minute. But risk indicators that could show that there potentially is a problem in engagement. This is not technology that's going to say, is your professional judgment appropriate? That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about risk indicators that potentially could highlight problem areas leading to the firm detecting engagement issues earlier. That's the big concept. Now, because of what we have seen in the DOL project and others, we're also just as concerned to make sure that we have all firms involved that should be involved in peer review or in practice monitoring, and all engagements are included that should be subject to review. The completeness is also just as critical to make this work. So that's the principle. Now I want to take it a little different. Instead of just at a high level talking about it, I want to put this in where we're going and practically speaking. We are developing right now, forget the future, right now, we are developing a self-monitoring tool that's using some of these concepts that we can do now. This self-monitoring tool is going to be totally voluntary. It's not a part of peer review. It is, other than that it could become a part of the firm's system of quality control. But it is a self-monitoring, it's a tool that will allow firms to monitor the progress through their engagements by looking at data that's going to come from various systems within the firm, and I'm going to have a visual in a minute that will help with this, that basically looks for anomalies. It looks for things that are out of sync. These are the engagement quality indicators that then brings through a dashboard, brings to the attention of a person in the firm who should be monitoring this that there is a potential problem where they can then go to the engagement and address the problem before it becomes a true engagement deficiency. That's what this tool is designed to do. Now, we are in the process right now of selecting, Beth, have we actually selected the vendor, or we're just still, I know we've had them all come in. Have we selected one yet? Huh? Yeah, any minute now. We've actually we've had several vendors in to talk to us about developing this. We can't tell you who the vendor is, we don't know yet. Hadn't selected the vendor that is actually going to be working to develop this tool. Now, honestly, we don't know when it's going to be available. I mean, available because it is just like anything else in IT. It's a process. In developing something takes longer than we'd like, but we will be working at a pilot level with certain firms that have already volunteered. A limited number of firms that will volunteer to see how well this works, and at some point we will roll it out to the greater population. I can't even tell you when. Don't know what the timing is, but this is a purely voluntary tool. Now to give you an idea of what this looks like. Can you advance it? Thank you. Okay. I don't know, if you've got the materials, you can look at this. I know you can't read this in the back. You look on the left-hand side, what that's representing is various systems that a firm would have. I mean, engagement management. I mean, if you've got, how many of you use the PPC's engagement management tool? I can't remember what they call it. The electronic work. Okay, that's an example. You've got that as one. Firms could have practice management tools. How many of you have automated time and billing systems? Okay? Now, again, we got to work to getting these to be able to communicate, but this you have it. You might have an HR system, meaning you might be tracking your CPE in some way for the firm at a consolidated level. There could be other applications, and there obviously has to be the ability to have manual input. But the idea is these different firm systems are speaking, providing data to this tool that we're developing that is using these different EQIs, engagement quality indicators, to look for anomalies. And the first one, there's an example that I just used to demonstrate for all. It's very simple. Here's the example. A flag comes up because the senior on a job is marked off on the audit program that on such and such a date, the engagement team had their planning session, of which the partner is supposed to be involved on this date. A flag's raised because the HR system, the practice management system, indicates the partner didn't have any time charged to this engagement on that day. That's an anomaly. All right, you got one of two things happen. You either have a renegade partner that told the senior, you don't need me in that engagement. Go ahead and have the planning meeting. I don't need to be there. That's a problem. You also could have a partner that just didn't fill out their timesheet right. Okay? It doesn't mean there's a problem. It's an indicator of what could be a problem. And it's giving the firm the opportunity to say, we need to investigate this, see if we have a problem or not, before it becomes a real engagement deficiency. This is what we're talking about. This is stage one. This is stage one of where we're going with this concept. And this we're going to do. This is purely voluntary. This is something, the reason we're doing this is as we started doing this concept, the steering task force said, look, we can do this now. This is something we can do. We don't have to worry about whether we have a replacement for practice monitoring. We can do this now, and we need to do this now to help firms. That's what this is all about. But now let's talk about how this can evolve. And that's when we're getting towards practice monitoring. The way the paper lays it out, can advance one slide for me, please? Can you do it in the back? Because I'm not. I'm trying here. I'm sorry. Mine's just not going anywhere. Okay. Rebecca, I'm glad it's not me. It's still probably me? Yeah, okay.